My children forgot I existed until they saw their name missing from the will. The room went silent. Not the polite kind of silent. Not the kind where someone clears their throat and people settle down. No. This was the kind of silence that falls on a room like a heavy curtain, like they were trying to figure out if what they just heard was real. My daughter Gabrielle was the first one to move. She stood up from her chair so fast that it scraped back against the floor and almost fell over. Her mouth was open, her hands were trembling. And the look on her face, Lord have mercy, the look on her face told me everything I needed to know about who she really was. Not my little girl anymore. Not the baby I used to carry on my shoulders down the street in Jacksonville when she was barely old enough to walk. Number. She was a grown woman, standing in the middle of a boardroom at Chandler Enterprises. And all she could think about was money.
What did you just say?
Her voice cracked a little. I folded the paper slowly. Your name is not in my will. All of you. The room exploded. My son Andre jumped to his feet. Terrence slammed his palm flat on the table. Aaliyah, my youngest daughter, pressed both hands over her mouth like she was about to scream. And Simone, my wife, the woman I had shared a home with for over 25 years. She sat perfectly still. She sat still. And that stillness told me more than any words could ever say. But to understand why none of my 4 children are included in my will, including my wife, we have to go back. Way back. Before the company. Before the marriage. Before the children. Before all of it. We have to go back to a summer evening when I was 22 years old. Sitting on the hood of a borrowed car on the east side of Jacksonville. With the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my life sitting right next to me. Laughing. And I want to tell you something. That laugh. That laugh was the beginning of my life. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me right now. If you are watching this on the Storytime with Precious channel and you have not subscribed yet, please do that right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you never miss a story. Drop your country and the time you are watching in the comments below before we continue. And if you are already subscribed, leave a like on this video. It helps more than you know. Now, grab a cup of water, because this story has layers. My name is Darius Chandler, and I'm going to tell you my story from the beginning. Not because I want your sympathy, not because I want to make anyone look bad, but because I learned something through all of this that I believe someone out there needs to hear. And maybe, just maybe, it will save you from making the same mistakes that nearly destroyed my entire life. So, Jacksonville, Florida. During the summer, I was 22 years old. I had this short haircut that my barber kept neat every 2 weeks without fail. And I was full of energy, full of life. My family was wealthy. Not just comfortable wealthy, not just doing well wealthy. My father, Mr. Leonard Chandler, had built Chandler Enterprises from practically nothing in the 70s, and by the time I was growing up, it had expanded into real estate, private logistics, and commercial construction across the Southeast. We had a large estate home in the Mandarin area of Jacksonville, gated, landscaped, the kind of house where the kitchen alone was bigger than most people's entire apartments. My mother, Vera Chandler, made sure everyone in Jacksonville knew exactly who we were. She wore her status the way other women wore perfume. Every morning, without fail. She was a proud woman, a calculating woman, and she had very specific ideas about who her son was going to become, who he was going to marry, what kind of life he was going to lead. She had mapped it all out before I was even old enough to understand what a map was. But life has a way of throwing maps in the trash. And Brianna was my interruption. I met her at a community cookout, one of those big summer gatherings they used to do in the East Side parks. Somebody's uncle had a DJ set up. Somebody's cousin was manning a grill the size of a small car. The smell of charcoal and seasoned meat was thick in the air. People were laughing. Kids were running around. Music was spilling out across the park like it was trying to fill every corner. And I was standing there holding a cup of something cold when I saw her, Brianna, She was standing with a group of women on the other side of the park. And I need you to understand something. When I say she was beautiful, I am not using that word lightly. She was the kind of beautiful that made you stop mid-sentence. The kind of beautiful that made you forget what you were thinking about. A rich, dark skin that caught the summer sun and turned it into something warm and golden. And her body, Lord, she was full. Curvy in every right place. Real. And she was laughing at something one of her friends said, throwing her head back, completely unbothered by anyone watching. I walked over. I do not know what gave me the nerve and audacity. Maybe it was the summer heat. Maybe it was the music. I tapped her on the shoulder. She turned around. And those eyes. I still see those eyes when I close mine some nights.
Excuse me.
Are you lost or something?
Not lost. I just think you have the best laugh I've heard all day.
You walked all the way across this park to tell me that.
Yes, ma'am.
She stared at me a moment longer. Then she smiled. And that was it. That was the beginning. Her name was Brianna Hines. She was 20 years old. She lived with her mother and grandmother in a small rental house off Myrtle Avenue. Her mother worked double shifts. Her grandmother raised Brianna and her younger sister, while her mother kept the lights on. There was no father in the picture. There was barely enough in the budget to get from one month to the next. But Brianna carried none of that weight on her face. You would never know from looking at her that times were hard. She was bright. She was funny in this dry, effortless way that caught you off guard every single time. And she was real. That was the word that kept coming to me whenever I was around her. Real. Not performing, not trying to be anything she wasn't. Just herself. Completely, fully, beautifully herself. We started seeing each other quietly. Mostly evenings. She would finish her shift at the grocery store where she worked, and I would pick her up in whichever car I had borrowed from my cousin because I didn't want to show up in anything that would make her uncomfortable. I was already learning her. Already understanding that she was proud. That she didn't want to feel like a charity case. That if I came rolling up in my family's vehicles and she found out how much money was behind me, she might close herself off before we even had a chance. So I kept that part of my life small around her. For a while. We would drive to the river, sit on benches near the north bank, watch the boats go by, talk for hours about everything and nothing at all. She told me about her dreams. She wanted to become a registered nurse. She was already taking classes at a community college, paying for it herself, working and studying and still managing to laugh the way she laughed. And I admired her more than I knew how to say. And she listened to me in a way that no one in my life had ever listened to me before. 3 months in, she found out about my family. She didn't hear it from me. She heard it from a coworker who recognized my last name. She called me that evening. The phone rang twice before I picked up. "Chandler?" she said. Her voice was quiet, measured. "Yeah," I said. "As in Leonard Chandler? As in Chandler Enterprises?" I paused. "My father's company." "Yes." Silence on the other end. Long enough that I thought the call dropped. "Brianna? You should have told me," she said. Not angry, just honest. "I know," I said. "Why didn't you?" "Because I wanted you to see me first, before you saw what comes with me." Another silence. "That's either very sweet or very manipulative," she said. "Which one do you think?" I could hear her exhale. "Very sweet," she said quietly. "But Darius..." She paused. "Now your family is going to have opinions about me." "My family doesn't run my life," I said. And I believed that then. I believed it completely. I was 22 years old and I believed it with everything in me. But I was wrong. And that mistake cost us both more than either of us could have imagined. My mother found out about Brianna 3 weeks later. I don't know who told her. My mother had a network of information that would have impressed a government agency. She knew everything about everyone who came near her family. She came to my room one Sunday morning while I was getting ready to go see Brianna. She knocked once. Then opened the door without waiting. She was wearing a cream-colored dress. Perfect posture. The kind of stillness about her that she wore like armor. "Sit down, Darius," she said. "I'm on my way out. Sit down." I sat. She stood in front of me, her hands folded in front of her. I hear you've been spending time with a girl from Myrtle Avenue, she said. I didn't answer. A Brianna? The way she said the name, like it was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. She's a friend, I said. She is not your friend, my mother said. She is a distraction, and a dangerous one. Mother. No. Her voice didn't raise. It never raised. That was the thing about Vera Chandler. She didn't need to raise her voice to make you feel the weight of it. That girl comes from nothing. She has nothing. And girls like that have a way of attaching themselves to men like you because they see an exit from their circumstances. That is not love, Darius. That is survival. You don't know her. I know her type. Her type. I looked at my mother. What type is that? She looked at me steadily. The kind that will smile and laugh and make you feel like the most important man in the world until she gets what she needs from you. I stood up. I'm going to be late. Darius. She said my name quietly. I'm asking you to end this. And I'm asking you to trust me. I left the room. Brianna and I continued seeing each other through the fall. By November, we had something together and we both had a good time that day. This was different. We had conversations that lasted until 2 in the morning. We disagreed about things and argued and then apologized and talked some more. She pushed me to be better. She asked me hard questions about what I believed and why I believed it. She didn't let me slide on things that mattered. And I loved her for it. I loved her for the way she would get quiet when something hurt her instead of performing emotion. I loved her for the way she spoke about her grandmother with this deep, humble reverence. And I loved her for the way she could eat an entire plate of her grandmother's cooking and still look completely unbothered and satisfied in a way that rich people rarely allowed themselves to look. One evening, we were parked near the river. The sky was doing that thing it does in Jacksonville in the fall, where the colors go purple and orange and everything feels suspended. She was leaning against me, my arm around her shoulder, and she said quietly, "Where do you see this going?" "Darius?" I didn't hesitate. "Wherever you'll let me take it," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "That's not a real answer." I turned to look at her. "Forward," I said. "I see this going forward. I'm not playing games with you, Brianna. I never was." She searched my face, and then she nodded slowly, like she was deciding something. "Okay," she whispered. That was all she said. Okay. But the way she said it, it meant everything. What happened next came so fast that I didn't even see the turn. And one evening I came home from an event. I was in a good mood. I walked through the front door of my family's home. My mother was sitting in the parlor, waiting, the way she always waited when she had something to say, like a chess player who has already seen the next 4 moves. "Sit down," she said. I sat. "I spoke with Brianna Hines this afternoon." I went still. "She came to see me," my mother said. I looked at her. "She came to you?" "She asked me to keep it quiet. She said she didn't want to embarrass you." My mother reached into the pocket of her sweater, pulled out her phone, and showed me a picture of $8,000 on the table in front of Brianna. "She took this, Darius." I stared at the picture. Something moved through me, something cold. "She said to tell you she's sorry, that she genuinely cared about you, but she needed to be realistic about her life." My mother's voice was so smooth. "She said she needed your money and that's why she pretended to love you," my mother continued. "And she just needed $8,000 to sort her life." I sat very still. "She took the money," I said. Not a question. Just the words sitting in my mouth like something bitter. "She took the money," my mother said softly. "And she asked me not to tell you she did. But I thought you deserved to know the truth. And she said she never loved you and I gave her the $8,000 and she left." I stood up, walked to my room, did not speak to anyone for the rest of that night. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, and I did something that 22-year-old men who feel betrayed do. I believed her. I believed my mother. Because why would a mother lie to her son? What kind of woman would do that? I was furious. I was hurt in the way that young men get hurt when they feel like their trust has been played with. I told myself I was done. Told myself she was just like my mother said, just trying to find a way out. And I threw myself into the version of my life that had always been waiting for me. The company, my father's work, the future that had been laid out before I was old enough to choose one for myself. And then in the spring, my father sent me to New York. A business development opportunity. A chance to learn the commercial side of things from the ground up. My mother pushed for it, said it was good timing, said getting out of Jacksonville for a while would clear my head. I agreed. I packed my things, and I left. Without a word to Brianna, without looking back. I told myself it was the right thing to do. I told myself she had made her choice, and I was making mine. I stayed in New York for 2 years. I worked hard. When I buried myself in work the way men bury themselves when they don't want to feel something. I learned the business from every angle. I sat in meetings and learned how deals were structured. I walked construction sites in a hard hat and learned what our contractors actually did. I flew to Atlanta for joint ventures and came back knowing how to negotiate with people who had every advantage over you. I grew up fast in New York. I had to. And slowly, the ache of what happened with Brianna faded into something that just sat quietly in the back of my chest. Not gone. Never completely gone. But quiet enough that I could function. I came back to Jacksonville 2 years later. Leaner, more confident. My father shook my hand when I came home. My mother hugged me and said I looked like a man now. And a month after I returned, she introduced me to Simone Lawson. She came from the Lawson family, old money in Jacksonville, our real estate and banking, the kind of family that had portraits of relatives on the walls going back 3 generations. She was 24 years old, slim and elegant with a presence that stopped a room without her even trying. Caramel skin. She was undeniably beautiful. Our mothers arranged dinner. Our fathers talked business over bourbon. And Simone and I sat across from each other at a restaurant table and made conversation the way 2 people do when they both know what is happening and have both already been told what the expected outcome is. She was polite, composed, smart. She laughed at appropriate times. And I looked at her and thought, this is a good woman. This is a woman I could build a life with. My father was talking about transitioning more responsibility to me. My mother was talking about the family's future. And Simone Lawson was what that future looked like. So, 6 months later, we were engaged. 8 months after that, we were married. In the biggest church in Riverside. Told myself this was what a man did. Took what was good and built something real with it. We moved into a house in San Marco. Beautiful neighborhood, wide streets, the kind of house that looks like something out of a magazine. And we settled into our life together. Simone was not unkind. She was not cruel. She was just distant. That there is a particular kind of loneliness that you feel inside a marriage. It is different from the loneliness of being alone. Being alone is simple. It is what it is. But being lonely in a marriage is complicated. Because there is a person right there, across the breakfast table, in the next room, sharing your bed. And yet, something fundamental is missing. Something that cannot be explained or named, but that you feel every single day like a low hum. Simone was present. She ran the household well. She was composed at every function. She dressed beautifully. She said the right things to the right people. But there was always something behind her eyes that was somewhere else. Some private world that she kept locked. Some room inside herself that she never opened the door to. Not for me, anyway. I tried. In the early years, I tried. I brought flowers. I planned evenings. I asked about her day. I asked about her thoughts. I asked about what she wanted from her life. And she would answer, politely, briefly, like someone giving a press statement. And then she would go back to wherever she actually lived inside herself. And I would stand outside that door. And wait. And eventually stop knocking. We had our first child, Gabrielle, 2 years after the wedding. Then Andre. Then Terrence. Then Aaliyah. 4 children in 9 years. And with each child, I thought, this is the thing that will bring us together. Yet this is the common purpose. This is what will make us real. But it never did. Because Simone gave our children her beauty and her discipline and her composure. The children grew up in that San Marco house. They grew up surrounded by everything. Good schools, private tutors, vacations, cars when they turned 18, every advantage. And I watched them grow with this hope that kept renewing itself no matter how many times it was disappointed. You know how it is with children. You think, this is the phase. They are going through a phase. They will grow out of it. They will find themselves. They will come back to you. But some children don't. Some children take everything you give them and use it to build a wall between you and them. And by the time I began to really see what was happening, the wall was already very high. Gabrielle was 25 by the time things got truly bad. Andre was 23. Terrence was 21. Aaliyah was 20. All adults. Now, all living, at various times, between the San Marco house and apartments I was paying for. All working, at various times, for Chandler Enterprises, in positions that they treated like allowances rather than responsibilities. They came in late. They left early. They spent the company card on things that had nothing to do with company business. They showed up at events representing the family name in ways that made me ashamed. And when I said something about it, Gabrielle would look at me with this flat expression, this cold, dismissive look. "Dad, relax," she'd say. Like I was overreacting. Like I was the problem. Andre would shrug. Terrence would simply leave the room. Aaliyah would go quiet in a way that felt like contempt being held politely in place. And Simone would say nothing. She would sit in whatever room she was in and say absolutely nothing. Not in my defense, not in theirs, just silence. And the kind of silence that makes you realize that you have been alone in this house for a very long time. And the silence wasn't even grief. It was just absence. There was one afternoon. I need to tell you about this afternoon, because it stays with me. It was a Saturday. I had come home from the office around 3 in the afternoon. Terrence was in the living room. Music playing through a speaker system I had paid for. His feet up on the coffee table. A plate of food balanced on his lap. But he didn't look up when I came in. I walked past him to get something from the kitchen. On my way back, I stopped.
Terrence. How did the quarterly review call go this week? You were supposed to join the call.
I forgot.
You forgot?
Yeah.
There were people on that call who rearranged their schedules to be there. Your grandfather built this company from...
Dad, can we do this later? I'm eating.
The room was quiet. I looked at my son, who had my father's jawline and his grandfather's eyes, who I had watched take his first steps, who I had stayed up with through fevers and bad dreams and that one terrible week in middle school when someone was bullying him and he didn't want to tell me, but eventually did. I looked at this person and felt like a stranger in front of him. "Sure," I said quietly. And I walked to my office, and I sat down, and for the first time, seriously, I began to think, to calculate, to count. Not in anger, not out of vengeance, but because a man eventually reaches a point where he has to take stock, where he has to ask himself what is real, what has value, and what is simply costing him more than he can justify. That afternoon was that point for me. The hibiscus came next. And honestly, this is where things stopped being just painful and started becoming something darker. I need to explain something. I have a severe allergy to hibiscus flowers. Not a mild sensitivity, not a little sneezing and discomfort. A severe, documented, medically confirmed reaction. It has been in my medical records since. My physician documented it after a response that frightened everyone in the room. My family knew, my children had been told, Simone knew. Everyone in my house knew. It was not a secret. It was not even a difficult thing to accommodate. Just no hibiscus, no hibiscus plants, no hibiscus tea, no hibiscus anything, that's all. And for a while that was respected. But about 2 years before the events I described in that boardroom, Something started changing at the San Marco house. I noticed it slowly. The way you notice something that's happening gradually. A pot on the back porch that hadn't been there before. A plant by the front entrance that appeared 1 week. Hibiscus. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I said something. It was removed. Then a month later, another one appeared. In the back garden this time. When I came home one evening and walked through the backyard and my throat started closing before I even knew what was happening. I had to use my medication. I sat on the back steps for 20 minutes until my breathing settled. Simone came outside. Looked at me. "You okay?" she asked. "There's hibiscus in the back garden," I said. She looked where I pointed. "Oh," she said. Just, "Oh." "Who planted that?" "I'll have it removed," she said. And she went back inside. No concern in her voice. No distress. "No, I'm sorry, are you all right?" Just, "I'll have it removed." But it kept happening. Over and over. And I want to be clear about something. I was not a fool. I was not naive. I had worked in business long enough to know that patterns are not accidents. One instance is an oversight. 2 is carelessness. 3 is a message. And by the third time, I understood the message clearly. The question was, what to do with that understanding. I said nothing. I moved quietly. I continued going to work. I continued running Chandler Enterprises. I continued showing up in every room I was supposed to show up in. And I carried this knowledge the way a man carries something dangerous. Carefully. With both hands. Making sure not to drop it before the time was right. The morning Malcolm walked into my building changed everything. Changed it in ways I was not expecting. In ways that rewrote things I thought were settled. It was a Tuesday. Gail, my HR director, had been running a round of hiring interviews for a junior analyst position. We needed someone for the commercial property division. Someone analytical. Someone detail-oriented. Someone who could manage data and still understand people. I was not involved in the initial rounds. I only got involved when my HR director, a sharp woman named Danielle Goodwin, stopped by my office and said, "We found someone you might want to meet." I looked up from my paperwork. "Why me specifically?" "He's exceptional," she said. "His test scores are in the top 3% we've ever seen. His interview responses were extraordinary. He has this way of thinking through problems that I haven't seen in years of hiring." "How old is he?" 24. Educational background? Associates from Florida State College. He's been working since he was 18 to put himself through, self-financed, everything. Something about that landed with me. "Send him in," I said. And so Malcolm Barrett came into my office. He was 24 years old, dressed simply but neatly. The way someone dresses when they take care with what they have without making a show of it. He sat across from me, straight-backed, present. He shook my hand firmly. "Tell me about yourself," I said. "I grew up in Jacksonville," he said. "East Side. My mother raised me by herself. We didn't have a lot, but she made sure I had everything that mattered. I've been working since I was 18 because I made her a promise when I was 16 that she would not work herself into the ground for me forever. And I've kept that promise." I watched him. "What drives you?" I asked. "Precision," he said. "I like things to be correct. I like to understand exactly how something works before I touch it. And when I touch it, I make sure it works better than before I got to it." I sat back in my chair. I felt something. I don't know how to describe it exactly. Something like recognition. But that didn't make sense. I had never met this young man before. I pushed the feeling aside. "You start Monday," I said. He blinked. "Just like that?" "Just like that." He paused. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me," I said. "You earned it. I'll know that for certain in about 30 days. He stood, shook my hand again, and turned to leave. And just as he reached the door, I noticed something. My assistant had brought in a fresh arrangement of flowers for the waiting area outside my office. Part of her weekly rotation. She meant well. But among the arrangement, hibiscus. One bunch of hibiscus among the others. The moment it hit the air, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. the catch in my throat. I covered my mouth, coughed. A hard, rough cough that made my eyes water. And then I heard another cough from the doorway. I looked up. Malcolm was still standing in the doorway, yet his hand over his mouth, his eyes slightly watering, looking at me. And we looked at each other. "Are you?" I started. "The flowers," he said quietly. "Hibiscus." I stared at him. "You're allergic?" I asked. He nodded. "Since I was a child," he said. We both stood there for a moment. My assistant rushed in when she heard the coughing. She removed the hibiscus from the arrangement immediately, apologizing profusely. The air cleared within minutes, but I sat back down in my chair after she left and looked at the door where Malcolm had just been and thought about something. Hibiscus allergy is not common. It is not something that runs in general populations. It is documented. It is unusual. And I had seen it in one other person in my entire life, myself. And I had been told by my physician that this specific type of allergic reaction had a strong hereditary component, that it ran in families. I sat in my office for a long time after Malcolm Barrett left that day. And the quiet question that started forming in my chest was not yet complete, but it was beginning. He started on Monday, and within 2 weeks, the entire building knew who Malcolm Barrett was. Not because he made noise, not because he promoted himself, but because the work spoke. He submitted his first analysis report 11 days after starting. It was thorough in a way that took me 20 minutes to read and left me sitting at my desk for 10 more minutes just thinking about the things he had caught that my senior analysts had missed for 2 quarters. I called Danielle. "You were right," I said. I could hear her smiling through the phone. "I know," she said. The other employees liked him too. He was easy to work with. He didn't have the kind of ego that made people defensive. He helped without being asked. So he shared information instead of hoarding it. He made the people around him better, which was exactly why my children hated him. My children found out about the will 6 months after Malcolm started. I don't know exactly how they found out. I had made changes to my estate documents quietly, through my attorney, Byron McCoy. Byron had been handling our family's legal affairs for 15 years. He was discreet. He was professional. He would not have told them. But someone in that office must have said something. Or perhaps Simone somehow found paperwork, or perhaps my children had been more watchful of me than I realized. However it happened. They found out, and the change in them was immediate. And I want to be honest about something. The change was not subtle. It was not even well disguised. It was the kind of behavioral reversal that would have been almost funny if it wasn't so sad. Gabrielle showed up at the office one morning with coffee. I stopped and got you that dark roast you like," she said, setting it on my desk. I looked at the cup, then at her. "Thank you," I said carefully. "How are you feeling, Dad?" she asked. "You've been working so hard lately. Have you been sleeping enough?" I picked up the coffee, took a sip. "I'm fine," I said. "You know we worry about you," she said. We, not I. We. Like the 4 of them had convened and decided together. "Do you?" I said. "Of course." She smiled. "You're our father." I looked at my daughter, and I wanted to say, where was this concern 3 weeks ago when I was working late and none of you even texted? But I said nothing. I smiled. "That's good to know," I said. Over the next 2 weeks, Andre offered to sit in on meetings. Terrence actually started showing up to work on time. Aaliyah came by my office just to chat, invited me to a dinner she was hosting. They told me she had been thinking about how much she had been taking for granted and that she wanted to do better. I sat through all of it. I listened. I responded warmly. I did not give a single thing away, because I was counting everything. And I had been counting for a long time. Now let me tell you about the afternoon everything shifted. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was standing at the window of my office on the 4th floor. We were on San Marco Boulevard then. Yet the building had these wide windows that overlooked the street below, and I was looking down at nothing in particular, Just the midday activity. People coming and going. Delivery trucks. A couple walking a dog. Normal things. And then I saw Malcolm walking out of the building below. He had his jacket over his arm, his phone in one hand, and a woman walking toward him from the direction of the parking lot. She was coming toward him with purpose, not rushing, but moving with that particular steadiness of someone who knows exactly where they're going. And she was rich dark skin under the afternoon sun, hair pulled back, a natural fullness to her that I recognized the way you recognize something from a dream, the way you recognize something from so deep in your memory that seeing it again almost feels like hallucination. She reached Malcolm. He put his arm around her shoulder and kissed her on the forehead. They stood there talking for a moment. And then she laughed, even from 4 floors up, through glass. With the muffled sounds of the city between us, I heard it. That laugh. I pressed my hand flat against the window. "Brianna," I said, out loud. To no one. To myself. To God. I ran. I actually ran. Which is not something I had done in years. Down the stairs because I didn't trust myself to wait for the elevator. Through the lobby. Out the front door. But by the time I reached the street, she was gone. Malcolm was walking back toward the building. He saw me. Looked surprised. "Mr. Chandler, is everything okay?" I was breathing hard. More from emotion than exertion. "That woman," I said. "Who was that just now? The woman you were talking to?" Malcolm looked in the direction she had gone. "My mother," he said. I stared at him. "What's your mother's name?" I said. He looked at me a little carefully now. "Brianna," he said. "Brianna Hines?" The world did something strange then. It didn't stop. Everything kept moving. People walked by. A car horn sounded somewhere. The wind moved. But for me, inside my body, inside my chest, inside whatever it is that holds a man together, everything went very, very still. I had not slept properly in 2 days when I finally found the courage to ask Malcolm for his mother's address. I called him into my office the morning after I saw her. He sat down across from me. His expression was measured, watchful, the way it always was. But there was something new in it now. Something that was trying to figure out what was happening. "Malcolm," I said. "Sir, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "I always am," he said. "Your mother," I said. Her name is Brianna Hines." "Yes." "Did she grow up on the east side of Jacksonville?" He went very still. "Yes," he said. "Did she grow up on Myrtle Avenue?" A pause. "Yes," he said. Quieter now. "Malcolm," I said. "I need you to trust me with something. Where does she live now?" He looked at me for a long moment, and something moved in his face that I couldn't quite read. Not suspicion, exactly. More like a question. A very deep question that he had been carrying for a very long time. Why?" he asked. "Because I believe I know her," I said. "From a long time ago." He held my gaze, and then he reached into his phone. And he wrote down an address on a piece of paper. He slid it across the desk. He stood, straightened his jacket, and just before he left, he stopped at the door, turned back. "Mr. Chandler," he said quietly. "Yeah." "She's a good woman," he said. "Whatever you're going to do with that address, I need you to remember that." And he left. And I held the piece of paper and just breathed. I drove there the next morning, Saturday. The address was a small house in the Springfield neighborhood. Not grand, not flashy, but well kept. A little flower garden by the front steps, a clean porch, wind chimes on the far end. I sat in my car outside for almost 15 minutes before I got out. I didn't know what I was going to say. I had rehearsed about 11 different versions of this conversation in the mirror the night before, and every single one of them felt inadequate. Because how do you walk up to someone you disappeared on many years ago and say, "I'm sorry"? How do you explain? How do you begin? I got out of the car. I walked to the door. I knocked. I heard movement inside. Footsteps. And then the door opened. And there she was. Brianna Hines. She's older now. And somehow more beautiful than she had been at 20. The rich, dark skin. The natural face. The smooth, low bun. Yet the same eyes that had looked at me across a Jacksonville park on a summer evening in 1993. She stared. I stared. And then her hand went to her mouth. Darius, she whispered. Brianna, I said, and the long, long, long years between us just collapsed. What are you doing here? She asked. I saw you, I said. Yesterday, outside my building. You were with Malcolm. Something moved in her eyes. You know Malcolm? He works for me. She was quiet. He didn't tell me, she said. He didn't know I was coming. He just gave me your address. She looked at me for another moment. Then she stepped back from the door. Come in, she said. The inside of her house was the way I imagined it would be. Everything in its place. Clean, warm. A few photographs on the walls. A bookshelf along one side of the living room. A small kitchen visible through a doorway. The kind of home that doesn't say, look at me. Just says, someone lives here who cares. We sat down in the living room, and she made tea. We sat with the cups in our hands, and for a while, neither of us said anything. Just existing in the same space. After 30 years. After everything. Just sitting in this small, warm room in Springfield, with the sound of the tea cooling between us. She spoke first. Your mother came to see me, she said. I know, I said. She looked up, surprised. You know? I know now, I said. I suspected, but I know now. She offered me money. $8,000, I said, while Brianna stared at me. I told her no, she said, and those 4 words hit me in the chest like something physical. I told her no. I sat with that. She came home and told me you had taken it, I said. She told me you had asked her not to tell me, that you said you were with me because you needed $8,000. Brianna set down her cup, slowly, carefully.
She lied. I never took anything from that woman. I waited for you at the river.
I'm so sorry, I said. And I meant it in the deepest, most literal way that those words can be meant. Not as a social nicety. Not as a way to move the conversation forward. As a true, unqualified, devastating apology for something that could not be undone, but had to be named. She looked at me, and her eyes did something complicated. You had a son, I said. She looked down at her tea. Malcolm, she said quietly. He's mine, I said. Not a question. Oh, she nodded once. Small, definitive.
He was 2 months along when you left. I didn't know yet. I found out 6 weeks after you were gone.
I pressed my hand over my mouth, closed my eyes. I had not known he existed, because my mother had lied, because I had been 22 years old and full of pride and hurt, and I had believed a lie without asking a single question. I'm sorry, I said again. She was quiet for a long moment. He grew up without a father, she said. And he never complained about it, not once. He just worked. He worked so hard. He put himself through school. He took care of me. He never stopped taking care of me. She paused.
Told him his father didn't know about him, that it was complicated, that it wasn't his fault and it wasn't my fault.
You protected him, I said. I protected him, she said. Silence. And then I said, I want to know him. She looked at me. Oh, he's not a child you get to just step into now. I know that too. He's built his own life, his own self, without you. I know, I said. I'm not trying to rewrite history. I can't. What I'm asking is a chance, a real chance, to be in his life going forward. She held my gaze. A long time. Then she said, That's not my decision to make. That's his. I know, I said. But will you let me come back? Can we talk? Can I? And my voice broke there. Just slightly. Just enough that she heard it. She looked at me, and something in her face shifted. Not softened entirely. She wasn't naive and she wasn't sentimental, but something shifted. You can come back, she said. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. I came back the following Saturday, and the one after that. We talked. Really talked. The way we used to talk on those evenings by the river in 1993. She told me about raising Malcolm alone, about how her mother had helped, about going back to get her nursing license, which she had completed eventually, about the years of long shifts and long nights, and the absolute refusal to let herself be defined by what had happened to her. About the small joys, the moments that had made the difficulty bearable. Malcolm's first words, the way he would line up all his toy cars in straight rows and inspect them with this serious little face, his first day of high school. Now, the way he had cried when her mother passed away a few years back. She told me stories and I listened with my whole body. I told her about my life too. About New York, about the company, about the marriage, about the children, about the quiet loneliness, about the hibiscus, about the silence in that San Marco house. She listened, the way she had always listened, like what I said mattered. By the third Saturday, I told her about the DNA test. I had not yet told anyone about it, and I had not yet confronted Simone. I had just carried it. I told Brianna. She sat with it. None of them are yours, she said. No, I said. She was quiet. How do you feel? She asked. I don't know how to answer that, I said. I raised them. I love them in the way you love people you raised regardless of biology. But I also feel lied to, she said. Yes. Cheated. Yes. And relieved, she said. I looked at her. A little, I admitted. She nodded slowly. Because now things make more sense, she said. Why they treat you the way they do. There's a bond that blood carries. They felt it wasn't there even if they couldn't name it. Or Simone felt it, I said. And that affected how she saw them in relation to me. That too, Brianna said. She looked at me carefully. What are you going to do? I have a plan, I said. A plan, she repeated. I'm going to read the will. She studied me. When? When the time is right, I said. Odd, and I'll know when that is. She nodded. Darius? She said. Yeah. Be careful. Always have been, I said. No, you haven't, she said. And she almost smiled when she said it. And I almost laughed. And in that almost, something that had been closed for 30 years cracked open just a little. And the light got in. But before we get to the will, let me tell you about the blood. Because the will was planned, but the blood was not. The blood was God. It was Terrence. He had been running himself into the ground. Not with work, you understand. With everything else. Late nights, poor eating, the kind of lifestyle that young people lead when they have too much money and not enough discipline. He collapsed one Sunday evening. Simone called me from the house. Her voice was the calmest I had ever heard it be. Not because she wasn't worried. I think because she had spent so many years keeping her emotions somewhere else that even genuine fear came out sounding composed. Terrence is in the hospital, she said. St. Vincent's. You need to come. I went. He was conscious but pale and weak. The doctors ran tests. There was internal bleeding. Serious enough. Serious enough that they needed blood transfusions. They typed everyone present. Simone first, no match. They tried me, no match. Yet they brought reserves from the blood bank and began what was needed. But I sat in that hospital waiting room, and a thought moved through my mind. Quietly, steadily, with the kind of certainty that doesn't need to announce itself. If Terrence were biologically mine, our blood types would be compatible in most standard scenarios. They were not even remotely close. I sat with that thought, and I made a decision. I called my doctor the following week. Privately. I explained what I needed. and he referred me to a lab. Discreet. Professional. I provided what was needed for 4 tests. I waited. 14 days later, I had my results. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the medical building, and I read 4 pages, 4 separate results, 4 separate children, 4 separate answers, all saying the same thing. In scientific language that was clear and precise and utterly without mercy. 0 biological relationship confirmed. 0. 4 times. I put the papers in my glove compartment, drove home, ate dinner, went to bed, and said nothing. For weeks. I want to tell you what that period was like, because it needs to be told truthfully. There are stories where someone gets devastating news and immediately becomes a different person, immediately becomes either heroic or destroyed. But that's not how it works in real life. In real life, there is a period in between, where you are still yourself, still going through the motions, still sitting at the breakfast table and passing the butter and answering emails and driving to work. But something inside you has been permanently rearranged. You are seeing everything differently now, not with rage, not even with grief yet, just with clarity, a cold, sharp, irreversible clarity. I looked at Simone differently now, not with hatred, not even with anger yet, just with this new understanding of who she was, of what this marriage had really been for both of us. Now, 2 people placed into a structure that neither of them had chosen, and both of them doing what they could within it. Both of them doing wrong things for understandable reasons. I had left Brianna because I believed a lie. Simone had brought children into our marriage that were not mine. We were both, in our own ways, products of arrangements and expectations and the quiet violence of parents who thought they knew better. I didn't forgive her immediately. But I began to understand. And understanding, I have learned, always comes before healing, even when healing takes a very long time. The thing about Malcolm that I want to tell you, the thing that I think matters most, is this. When I eventually told him, when I asked him to meet me outside of the office, at a restaurant in Riverside on a Thursday evening, when I sat across from him and put my hands on the table and said, Malcolm, your mother and I knew each other before you were born, and I believe that I am your father. He didn't cry. He didn't get angry. He didn't throw the table over or storm out. He just looked at me, very steadily, for a long time, and then he said, I know. I blinked. You know? I said. I suspected, he said. From the moment you coughed in that doorway and looked at me the way you looked at me. I've done my research since then, Mr. Chandler. The allergy, the timeline, the way you've been watching me since I started. I stared at him. Oh, and then my mother confirmed it, he said. After your 3rd Saturday visit. She told him. She had told him. I leaned back. How do you feel about it? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. I feel like I have a lot of questions, he said. And I feel like I'm not ready to call you Dad. Maybe ever, maybe someday. I don't know. That's fair, I said. I feel like you owe my mother something you can never fully repay, he said. And I feel like you know that. I do, I said. And I feel like... He paused, looked down at his coffee. I feel like you're trying to do the right thing now, even if you didn't before. He looked up. I can respect that, he said. That's more than I deserve, I said. He shrugged. Maybe, he said. Not unkindly, just honestly. And we drank our coffee. And we talked for 2 hours. About him, about his life, about his mother, about his plans, about what kind of relationship, if any, made sense for us going forward. It was not a fairy tale reunion. It was not the kind of thing that gets wrapped in music and slow motion. It was 2 men talking. One of them with a lot of catching up to do. And one of them deciding how much he was willing to let. But it was real. And real was the best thing it could have been. The morning of the reading. I told Simone I was having a family meeting at the office. I told her it was important, and I needed her there. She looked at me with that composed expression. What kind of meeting? She asked. The important kind, I said. She looked at me a moment longer, then nodded. All right, she said. I called each of my children separately, kept the call brief, just be at the office at 2 o'clock on Thursday. It's important. Gabrielle started to ask questions. Just be there, I said. She was. They all were. I'd also asked my parents to come. My father, Leonard Chandler, was 81 years old now, slower, quieter. A man who had given much of his life to his business and was now watching from a quieter distance. My mother, Vera Chandler, was 78, still perfectly dressed, still perfectly composed, still moving through the world with that deliberate precision that had defined her for as long as I had known her. She took her seat in the boardroom without saying much, looked around, noticed that Malcolm was also in the room. Her expression shifted slightly, just slightly. Something like recognition that something was about to happen that she hadn't been warned about. Byron McCoy was there with his briefcase. He nodded to me when I walked in. I nodded back. I stood at the head of the table, looked around the room, then recovered. I cleared my throat. Thank you all for coming, I said. And the room went exactly as quiet as I described at the beginning of this story. I've asked you here today, I said, because I want to be clear about some things. My voice was steady. I had made peace with this. This is my will, I said, holding up the document. And I am going to read parts of it to you myself, because I believe that when a man has something to say to his family, he should say it himself. Gabrielle was already watching me with that expression, alert now. Not the casual indifference of before, no. And now she was watching me the way someone watches a card player when they suspect the deck has been rearranged. I want to start by thanking my family, I said. A pause. I want to thank you for teaching me things I could not have learned any other way. Andre shifted in his seat. Terrence's jaw was tight. I want to thank my wife, Simone, for the years she was present, for running our household, for being, in her own way, faithful to a structure that was placed on both of us before we fully understood what we were agreeing to. Simone's face was still, but her hands on the table moved slightly. And I want to thank my children for teaching me the value of patience, I said. A pause. Long enough. And discernment. The air in the room changed. Chandler Enterprises, I said. The company my father built. The company I have run for over 2 decades. As the company that has been this family's legacy and this city's employer. I set the document on the table. Chandler Enterprises passes to Malcolm Hines. The room exploded. Gabrielle's voice. What did you just say? Shaking. Andre. Is this a joke? Dad? It's not a joke, I said calmly. You're giving the company to a stranger? Terrence said. His voice was louder than he intended. The vein at his temple was visible. Not a stranger, I said. I looked at Malcolm, who was sitting very still, while watching everything, with those quiet, watchful eyes. This is Malcolm Hines, I said. He is my son. The room went a different kind of quiet. The first quiet was shock. This was confusion. What? Gabrielle said. Malcolm is my biological son, I said. His mother is Brianna Hines. We were together before my marriage, before any of you were born. My mother had not moved. She was sitting perfectly still. I pulled out 4 smaller envelopes, one for each of my children. And I placed them on the table, slid one toward each of them. Open those, I said. They looked at each other. Gabrielle opened hers first. She read. And then her face did something I had not expected. It crumpled. Not into anger, into something more complex than that. Andre opened his. He read slowly, then sat back, and looked at his mother. Mom, he said. His voice was different. All the hostility had left it. Something raw was there instead. Mom, what is this? Simone sat very still. Terrence and Aaliyah had also opened theirs. The table was silent. Those are DNA results, I said. Conducted through a licensed and accredited laboratory, confirming that none of the 4 of you are biologically related to me. Another silence. A different one. the kind that lives at the center of a very old storm. What? Gabrielle whispered. Not to me, to her mother. Mom, Aaliyah said. Simone looked around the table, at her children, at me, at Byron, at Malcolm, at Brianna sitting against the wall, at my mother, at my father. And then she did something I had not expected either. She stood up, slowly, with perfect posture, and she spoke. His name was Kendrick Goodwin, she said. We met in college. I loved him. I still love him. I've loved him every day of my married life. The room was absolutely still. My parents forced this marriage, she said. His parents forced it too. We were property to them, pieces on a board. She looked at me. I'm sorry. Darius? I am genuinely sorry. You deserve better than what I gave you. You deserved honesty. And I didn't have the courage to give you that. I love you, she said to her children. All four of you. Whatever else I've done wrong, that has always been true. She picked up her purse, looked at me one more time. I'll be out of the house within the week, she said. And then Simone Lawson Chandler walked out of the boardroom. With the same quiet precision she had walked into every room for years. Yet except this time she left something behind. The truth. My mother had not moved throughout all of this. After Simone left, the room settled into something that felt like the aftermath of a very large sound. Echoing. My children were still sitting with those papers in their hands, processing. Malcolm sat quietly at the end of the table. Byron was carefully arranging documents, and my father looked tired, old in a way he hadn't looked when he walked in. My mother cleared her throat. As I looked at her, she looked back at me, and something passed between us. Mother, I said. Yes, she said. Do you have anything to say? She was quiet for a long moment. The room waited. My mother was not a woman who apologized easily. She was not built for vulnerability. She had spent her entire life in the armor of her composure and her pride. But she looked at Brianna, and then my mother looked at Malcolm. I was wrong, she said. I told my son a lie 30 years ago, she said. No, I told him that Brianna had taken money to walk away. That was not true. I said it to separate them, and it worked. She paused. And I have to live with what that cost. She looked at Brianna. I owe you an apology, she said. A real one. I don't expect it to mean much at this point, but I owe it to you. Brianna held her gaze. She did not smile. She did not reach out. She simply nodded, once. What happened after the boardroom? After the documents? After Simone's departure and my mother's admission and the 4 envelopes sitting on the table? Is that we sat there. All of us. For a while. And nobody said anything grand. Nobody had a speech ready for this. My children sat with papers that told them things about themselves that no document should have to tell a person. And I think in those moments, something humanized them to me. Even Gabrielle. Even Andre. Even Terrence, who had dismissed me in the living room with his feet on the coffee table. They were people. People who had grown up in a house where the love on the surface was real, but something underneath it was always slightly off balance. People who had been shaped by forces neither they nor I had fully controlled. They had not been good to me. That was true. They had been careless and selfish, and at times openly disrespectful. That was also true. But they were not simply villains. They were people. In the weeks that followed, life rearranged itself, the way life always does. Not neatly, not quickly, but with purpose. Simone moved to an apartment in Avondale. She reached out to Kendrick Goodwin, the man she had loved in college. I heard through the quiet channels of mutual acquaintances that they had reconnected. I hope she is happy. I mean that without bitterness. She deserved to love someone who wanted to be loved by her, and I deserved to not be a stand-in for someone else. But my children came to me separately over the weeks that followed. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just each of them in their own time finding their way to my door. Andre came first. We had lunch at a place on the South Bank. He didn't have a prepared speech. He just said, "I want to do better. In the company. At everything. I don't know how, but I want to try." I said, "Then try." "That's all?" "Start there," I said. "And we'll see what grows from it." He nodded. And he did try. I'm telling you now, looking back on it. He tried. Not perfectly, but genuinely. Gabrielle came next. She sat in my office and we talked for almost 2 hours. About her mother, about what she had known and what she hadn't, about what she wished had been different. She didn't cry. She was not built for crying in front of people, but her voice had something in it that I recognized as grief held carefully in place. She said, "I was cold to you. For years. I know that." "Yes," I said. "Oh, some of it was..." She searched for the word. "Resentment? I don't know why exactly. Some undercurrent that I couldn't name. But I could feel that something wasn't right and I directed it at you." "Because I was there," I said. "And your mother was there and you couldn't direct it at her." She looked at me. "Maybe," she said. "Is that a real explanation or just an excuse?" "I don't know," I said. "Probably both. Most things are." She almost smiled. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked. We're going to try," I said. "Is that enough?" "It has to start somewhere." Terrence and Aaliyah came together, which was very them. They sat across from me in the living room of the San Marco house, and Terrence said, with that directness that I had always respected even when everything else about his behavior frustrated me, "I need to know something." "Okay," I said. "You knew those plants were being put in the garden," he said. "The hibiscus. You knew what that meant." The room was very still. "I know what you're asking," I said. "Then answer it." "I suspected," I said. "I don't know for certain who was behind it. But I believe it was more thoughtless than intentional. I want to believe that." He held my gaze. "Was it you?" I asked quietly. He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said. "Okay," I said. "I didn't know someone was doing it on purpose," he said. "I thought it was just the gardener making a mistake." "All right," I said. Aaliyah said, "I'm sorry, Dad." "Aaliyah." "No," she said. "I need to say it. I've needed to say it for a long time. I took you for granted. We all did. You were just there. Just the person who signed the checks and came to events, and we never stopped to actually see you." I looked at my youngest. "I saw you," I said. "Even when you didn't see me." She pressed her lips together, blinked hard. "I'm going to do better," she said. "I know," I said. Malcolm came to the house one Sunday, unannounced. He knocked on the front door. I opened it. He was standing there with a jacket on, his hands in his pockets. "I thought maybe I'd see where you live," he said. "Come in," I said. We walked through the house. He was quiet, looking at everything carefully, the way he looked at everything carefully. When we got to my study, he paused at the bookshelves. He looked at the titles. "You read a lot," he said. "Always have," I said. "Your mother?" "Her too," he said. "I grew up with books everywhere." He turned to look at me. "She talks about you," he said. "Now that all of it's out." "She talks about you." "Good things or bad things?" I asked. "Both," he said. "Neither. Just things. Like someone talking about a chapter of their life that they're finally allowed to revisit." I nodded slowly. "I'm glad," I said, "that she's revisiting it." He looked at me. "Are you in love with her?" he asked. Direct, just like his mother. I looked at him for a long moment. Okay, and then I said something true. "I never stopped," I said. He held my gaze, then looked back at the bookshelf. "Okay," he said, not giving me permission, not blessing it, just, okay, just acknowledging it, which was more than I had any right to ask for. Brianna and I had been meeting every Saturday for months by then. By now it was something we looked forward to. A standing thing. Coffee, then a walk, then sometimes dinner. Talking. Always talking. which we had 30 years of conversation to catch up on. And slowly, something that had been waiting, something that had never actually gone away despite everything that had been placed between us, began to find its shape again. It was not the same as before. We were not 22 and 20. We had scars and history and the particular quiet strength of people who have survived things. We moved slowly. There was no rushing. There was no grand declaration. Just one evening, sitting on a bench by the same river where we used to sit in 1993, the Jacksonville skyline reflecting in the water. The evening air warm. She was next to me, and she leaned her head on my shoulder, and I put my arm around her. And we sat like that for a long time without saying anything, and it felt like something being set right. Not perfectly, not the way it might have been if none of it had happened, but right in the way that things can be right after damage. Right in the way that matters? The real way. Now, before I let you go, I have a question for you, and I need you to be honest in the comments. If you were in my position, after finding out the truth about everything, would you have kept supporting those 4 children even after knowing they weren't biologically yours just as I did? Would you have found it in yourself to forgive them for how they treated you? Oh, and if your parents had separated you from the love of your life when you were young, would you have been able to forgive them too? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. And while you're down there, if you are not yet subscribed to Storytime with Precious, do that right now. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on your notification bell, because new stories are going up regularly, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. I want to close with something, if not a summary, not a neat ribbon tied around everything, because life doesn't tie up in neat ribbons. It ties up in complicated, layered, human ways. With some things resolved and some things still healing, and some things that will never be completely finished. But I want to close with what I learned, what this whole journey taught me. Sit with me for a minute. I learned that the decisions we make for our children are not always the protection we tell ourselves they are, which my mother believed she was protecting me. She was certain of it. She lost sleep over it. She acted out of love, in her way. And that love, unguarded by wisdom and humility, became a chain that held multiple lives in place for 30 years. Choosing a partner for your child, deciding who is good enough, who comes from the right background, who has the right last name, or the right address, or the right family. These decisions carry consequences that the parents who make them rarely have to live with alone. It is the children who live with them. It is the people who are excluded who live with them. And the cost is not always visible immediately. I also learned that the truth always finds its way. Not always quickly, not always cleanly, but always. Simone kept her truth for 25 years. My mother kept hers for 30. And still, in a boardroom, on a Thursday afternoon, everything came out. Well, because it always does. It always does. I learned that biological connection matters and that it doesn't matter. I raised 4 children who were not biologically mine. I love them. I still love them and I still care for them. That love is real and it is mine and no document and no test result can touch it. But I also learned that the bonds you form by honest choice carry something different. Something that the bonds formed by deception cannot carry. And I learned that it is never too late. This is perhaps the most important thing. I was gray at the temples, lines around the eyes, and I got to sit on a bench by the river with the woman I had loved since my 20s, and say, I love you, and hear it back. It is never too late to do the right thing. It is never too late to tell the truth. It is never too late to acknowledge a wrong. It is never too late to find your way back to something real. You might arrive differently than you left. You might arrive older and slower and more quietly, but you can arrive. And arriving matters. Even late, arriving always matters. Hear me. It is not too late. You are not too far gone. You are not too old. You are not too wrong. The truth is not done working. The river is still there. And so is the bench. And so is the person. Start there. Start with telling yourself the truth, and see what grows from it. That is the end of my story. Or maybe it's just the beginning of the next chapter. I suppose that depends on how you look at it. But either way, I am Darius Chandler, and I am finally, completely, honestly, home. Like this video if it moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this one, check out the other videos on this channel. They are waiting for you. This has been Storytime with Precious, and I will see you in the next one.